The highway stretched like a black ribbon under the moonless sky, and Clarice Stratton felt the cold leather seat beneath her as the Mercedes S-Class roared through the night at 90 miles per hour. 8 months pregnant, her swollen belly pressed against the seatbelt, and every bump in the road sent a jolt through her spine. She should have been resting at home. She should have been preparing the nursery. Instead, she sat in the back seat of her husband's car, watching the back of his head as he leaned toward the blonde woman in the passenger seat, the woman who wore Clarice's anniversary necklace around her throat. Adrian Corleone didn't look back at her once. His mistress, Vivian, did, though. She turned in her seat, and the smile she wore was the kind that could cut glass. "You know, Clarice," she purred, her manicured fingers trailing along the headrest, "some people just don't know when they're not wanted anymore." Before we dive deeper into this nightmare, hey, beautiful souls, welcome back to the channel. Or if you're new here, welcome to stories that'll have your heart racing and your mind spinning. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing our global family connect. And how are you doing? Really, I want to know. If you haven't subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now, because trust me, you're going to want to see how this story unfolds. This one's going to shake you. Now, back to Clarissa's hell. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing the danger that hummed in the air like electricity before a storm. Clarissa's hands instinctively cradled her belly, protective, fierce. She'd been married to Adrian for 3 years. 3 years of watching him build his tech empire while slowly erasing her from his life. The whispers started 6 months ago. The late nights, the lipstick stains, the way he stopped looking at her like she mattered. But tonight was different. Tonight felt like an ending. "Adrian," Clarissa's voice was steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Where are we going? You said we were going to the hospital for my checkup." He finally glanced at her in the rearview mirror, and what she saw in his eyes made her blood turn to ice. There was nothing there. No warmth, no recognition, just cold calculation. "Change of plans, sweetheart," he said, and the endearment sounded like poison on his tongue. Vivian's laugh was high and sharp, like breaking glass. She reached over and squeezed Adrian's thigh with possessive familiarity. "Oh, Adrian, just tell her already. The suspense is killing me." The speedometer climbed. 95, 100. The world outside blurred into darkness and streaks of light. Clarissa's heart hammered against her chest. Something was catastrophically wrong. She reached for her phone in her purse, but Vivian was faster. "Looking for this?" The blonde held up Clarissa's phone, waving it mockingly before tossing it out the window. It disappeared into the night with a faint clatter against asphalt. "What the hell are you doing?" Clarice lunged forward, but the seatbelt locked, holding her back. Adrian's voice cut through the word like a blade. "Vivian's right. You don't know when you're not wanted. You've been a problem for months, Clarice. An embarrassment. My investors, my board, they don't want to see me with you." The unspoken word hung in the air, heavy and vile. You, black, pregnant, unwanted. Clarice felt something crack inside her chest, but it wasn't her spirit. Not yet. "You're my husband. This is your child." "Is it?" Adrian's eyes met hers again in the mirror, and this time she saw something worse than indifference. She saw cruelty. "Because I'm starting to have my doubts, Clarice." Convenient timing, don't you think? Getting pregnant right when my company went public? "You're insane." Vivian unbuckled her seatbelt, and turned fully around, her body twisting with predatory grace. "He doesn't want you anymore, honey, and honestly, neither does anyone else. You're just a little inconvenience that needs to be handled." The car swerved suddenly onto an exit ramp, then onto a service road that grew darker and more desolate with every passing second. No streetlights, no other cars, just endless darkness and the growl of the engine. Clarissa's water hadn't broken yet, but she felt the baby drop lower, the pressure intense and terrifying. "Not now. Please, God, not now." "Adrian, please," she whispered, hating the desperation in her voice, but unable to stop it. "Whatever you're planning, don't do this. I'll sign divorce papers. I'll disappear. Just get me to a hospital first." He pulled over onto the shoulder of the road, gravel crunching under the tires. The car idled, its headlights cutting through the absolute darkness ahead. For a moment, Clarisse thought he'd changed his mind, that some shred of the man she'd married still existed. Then Vivian opened her door and stepped out into the night. "Adrian?" Clarissa's voice rose in panic. Vivian walked around to Clarissa's door, her heels clicking on the pavement like a countdown. When she yanked the door open, the interior light flooded the car, harsh and exposing. "Get out," Vivian said sweetly. "No." Clarisse gripped the seat, her pregnant body awkward and vulnerable. That's when Adrian spoke, and his words shattered everything. "Vivian, just do it. Make it look like an accident." What happened next would change all their lives forever, but not in the way Adrian Corleone ever imagined. Clarisse had always been a fighter. Growing up in South Memphis, she'd learned early that the world didn't hand you anything. Her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, taught her that dignity wasn't given, it was claimed. Her father, gone before she could remember him, left behind only a lesson: never depend on a man to define your worth. But Adrian Corleone had been different, or so she'd believed. They'd met 4 years ago at a charity gala where she was catering, working her way through business school. He was the golden boy of Silicon Valley, 32, brilliant, building an AI empire that promised to revolutionize healthcare. When he approached her that night, asking about the hors d'oeuvres with genuine interest, she'd seen past the expensive suit to something that seemed real. "You have the most beautiful smile," he'd said, and unlike every other wealthy man who'd hit on her while she served champagne, his eyes actually met hers. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. Private jets, weekend trips to Paris. But what made Clarisse fall in love wasn't the money. It was the way Adrian listened when she talked about her dreams of opening her own restaurant. The way he held her when she cried about her mother's cancer diagnosis. The way he proposed in her mother's hospital room 3 months before she passed. Because he knew Clarisse wanted her mama to see her happy. That Adrian, the one who'd wept at their small wedding, who'd promised to build a life together, where had he gone? Now, on this desolate highway with his mistress's hands reaching for her, Clarisse realized the truth with devastating clarity, that Adrian had never existed. He'd been a performance, a role played by a man who saw her as a novelty, an exotic accessory for his liberal image, until she became inconvenient. "I said get out!" Vivian's voice shattered her thoughts. Clarisse looked at the woman who'd destroyed her marriage. Vivian Chen was everything Adrian's world expected. Blonde, petite, from old money. Her father sat on the board of Adrian's company. Her connections had opened doors that Clarissa's love never could. But there was something else in Vivian's eyes now, something manic and desperate. This wasn't just about stealing a husband. This was about eliminating competition. "Adrian, look at me!" Clarisse screamed at her husband's silhouette. "Look at what you're doing!" For one agonizing second, Adrian turned. In the harsh interior light, Clarisse saw the man she'd married flicker across his face. Doubt, maybe even regret. His jaw tightened. His hand reached for the door handle. He was going to stop this. He had to. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and whatever humanity had surfaced vanished instantly. "The prenup is airtight, Vivian. No witnesses, remember?" "No witnesses," Vivian repeated, smiling. She grabbed Clarissa's arm with surprising strength. The baby kicked violently, as if fighting alongside its mother. Clarisse felt a warm trickle down her leg, not her water breaking, but the beginning of something equally terrifying. Contractions. Early labor triggered by stress and fear. "I'm in labor," Clarisse gasped. "The baby's coming." "Then it's coming without a father," Vivian hissed. And she pulled. Clarissa's fingers lost their grip on the leather seat. Her pregnant body tumbled awkwardly out of the car, hands instinctively protecting her belly. She hit the gravel shoulder hard, pain exploding through her hip and shoulder. The Mercedes door slammed shut. "Drive, okay, baby," Vivian said, climbing back into the passenger seat. Through the window, Clarisse saw Adrian's eyes in the rearview mirror one last time. She wanted to see remorse, hesitation, something human. Instead, she saw him smile. Then he laughed, a sound so cold and cruel it would haunt her forever, and punched the accelerator. If you're feeling this story, drop a comment and let me know. Your support keeps these stories coming. And seriously, hit subscribe if you haven't yet. You're going to want to see what happens next. The Mercedes didn't just drive away. It accelerated, hard and fast, gravel spitting from beneath its tires like bullets. But Clarisse wasn't on the shoulder anymore. When Vivian had pulled her, the momentum had carried her further than anyone expected. She was still clinging to the door handle when Adrian hit the gas. For 3 terrible seconds, Clarissa's body dragged alongside the speeding car, her pregnant belly scraping against gravel and asphalt, her screams swallowed by the roar of the engine, and Vivian's manic laughter. Then Vivian did something that would seal all their fates. She leaned out the window, her face twisted with rage, and slammed her designer heel into Clarissa's fingers, once, twice, 3 times, until Clarissa's grip broke. The world spun. Sky, ground, pain, darkness. Clarissa's body hit the highway at 60 miles per hour, rolling, tumbling, until she came to rest in the grass median, every nerve ending screaming. Blood pooled beneath her head. Her vision blurred, and then she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of her water breaking, warm and urgent. "No," she whispered into the darkness. "Not like this." Inside the Mercedes, Adrian watched his rearview mirror as his wife's body disappeared into the night like discarded trash. "Is she?" he started to ask. "Dead? Probably," Vivian said, reapplying her lipstick in the visor mirror as casually as if they'd just left brunch. "And if she's not, she will be soon. No phone, no help. Pregnant and bleeding on a highway nobody uses. Nature will handle the rest." Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, just a fleeting, dangerous moment, he wondered what the hell he'd just done. Then his phone buzzed again. Another message from his board chairman. Another reminder of why Clarisse had to disappear. "The IPO launches tomorrow. Can't have any complications. You understand. He understood perfectly. His company was about to go public at a $12 billion valuation. His investors had made it clear. The optics of a black wife didn't fit their vision, especially not one claiming to carry his heir, especially not when Vivian's father controlled 40% of the voting shares. "We never speak of this again," Adrian said, his voice hollow. "Ever." Vivian leaned over and kissed his cheek. "Speak of what, darling? You've been with me all evening. We have dinner reservations to prove it." Adrian pulled out his phone and made the call he'd been preparing for weeks. "It's done. Activate the death certificate. Car accident, just like we discussed. And get PR ready. I'll need to play the grieving widower for exactly 3 months before I announce my engagement to Vivian." On the other end, his fixer's voice was cold and professional. "What about the body? By the time anyone finds her, it won't matter. The story's already written." But the universe had other plans. Back on that desolate highway, Clarisse wasn't dying. She was fighting. Every contraction hit like a sledgehammer. Her body instinctively preparing to bring life into the world even as death circled overhead. She managed to drag herself further into the median, away from the road, her hands clutching her belly. "Stay with me, baby," she whispered through gritted teeth. "We're survivors, you hear me? Survivors." Headlights appeared in the distance. Not Adrian returning, something else. A semi-truck, its engine rumbling like thunder as it approached. Clarisse tried to wave, to scream, but another contraction seized her, and all she could do was pray. The truck didn't slow down. It roared past, and for a moment, despair threatened to swallow her whole. Then she heard it. The squeal of air brakes. The truck was stopping. A door opened. Heavy boots hit the pavement, running toward her. "Jesus Christ, lady, are you okay?" "Don't move. I'm calling 911. The voice belonged to a man in his 50s, his weathered face illuminated by his phone's screen. His name was Thomas Hagen, a long-haul trucker who'd taken this route by mistake after his GPS malfunctioned. Some might call it luck. Clarisse would later call it fate. Because Thomas Hagen wasn't just any trucker. He was a former Army medic who'd delivered 3 babies in combat zones. And he was about to deliver one more. Right there on the highway median, under the stars, while Adrian Corleone celebrated his wife's murder 50 miles away. "The baby's coming now," Clarisse gasped. Thomas's eyes went wide, but his training kicked in instantly. "Then let's bring your baby into this world, ma'am. You're not dying tonight. Not on my watch." What neither of them knew was that this highway birth would be witnessed by someone who would change everything. Thomas Hagen had seen combat in Fallujah, had held dying soldiers in his arms, had made impossible decisions under fire. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for delivering a baby on a dark highway while a woman bled from a dozen wounds and whispered her husband's name like a curse. "Push, ma'am, push!" Thomas barked, his hands steady despite the chaos. Clarisse screamed, raw and primal, her body arching as another contraction tore through her. The baby was coming fast, too fast. Her vision swam with pain and blood loss, but somewhere deep in her core, a fierce determination blazed. "You will not die here. Your baby will not die here." "I can see the head," Thomas shouted. "One more push. Give me everything you've got." Clarisse bore down with a warrior's fury, and suddenly, impossibly, there was a cry. Not hers, her baby's. The sound shattered the night like breaking glass, piercing and perfect and alive. "It's a girl," Thomas said, his voice cracking with emotion as he wrapped the infant in his flannel shirt. "She's breathing. She's perfect." Clarissa's arms reached out instinctively, and when Thomas placed the tiny wailing baby on her chest, something inside her that had been broken suddenly fused back together, stronger than before. "Naomi," Clarisse whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Your name is Naomi. It means pleasant, beautiful. And you are going to have a beautiful life, baby girl. I promise you." But Thomas's expression darkened as he examined Clarisse more closely. "Ma'am, you're losing too much blood. I've got tourniquets in my truck, but we need that ambulance now." He'd called 911 7 minutes ago. Help was coming. What none of them realized was that someone else was already there. Parked 200 yards back, hidden in the darkness with his headlights off, sat a silver Audi belonging to James Wolfe, Adrian Corleone's head of security and personal fixer. He'd been following the Mercedes all night, insurance for Adrian's plan. His job was simple: confirm the body, photograph the scene, and disappear. But this? A live birth witnessed by a trucker? This was a catastrophe. James lifted his camera with its telephoto lens and began shooting. Click, click, click. Every photo was insurance. Proof that Adrian Corleone's dead wife had just given birth to his very much alive daughter. This changes everything, James thought, his mind already calculating angles. And I'm betting Adrian doesn't know yet. He'd worked for men like Adrian for 15 years, men who thought money could erase mistakes, that power meant invincibility. But James had learned something those men never understood. Evidence was currency, and he'd just struck gold. He made a call, not to Adrian, to someone else entirely. "It's Wolfe. I need you to listen very carefully." 7 miles away, Adrian Corleone stood in the VIP section of Aurelio, San Francisco's most exclusive restaurant, champagne in hand. Vivian clung to his arm, radiant in a dress that cost more than most people's cars. Around them, investors and board members celebrated tomorrow's IPO launch. "To Adrian," announced Richard Chen, Vivian's father and the company's largest shareholder. "The man who's about to make us all very, very rich." Glasses clinked. Adrian smiled. He was untouchable. His phone buzzed. A text from James Wolfe. "We need to talk, now." Adrian excused himself, stepping onto the restaurant's terrace. "This better be good, Wolfe. I'm in the middle of—" "She's alive." The champagne glass nearly slipped from Adrian's fingers. "What?" "Your wife survived. A trucker found her. She just gave birth on the highway. Mother and baby are both alive, and an ambulance is en route." The San Francisco skyline blurred before Adrian's eyes. This wasn't possible. Vivian had pushed her out at 60 miles per hour. She was supposed to be dead. Erased. Gone. "Where are they taking her?" Adrian's voice was ice. "St. Catherine's Medical Center. But boss, there's something else. I documented everything. Photos, videos, timestamps, all stored in 3 separate locations." Adrian's blood ran cold. "Are you threatening me, Wolfe?" "I'm protecting myself. See, I was supposed to be cleaning up a murder scene. Instead, I've got evidence of attempted murder of a pregnant woman. That's a whole different game. So here's what's going to happen." Adrian ended the call and immediately dialed another number. His lawyer. His fixer's fixer. The man who handled problems that even James Wolfe couldn't know about. "I need a doctor at St. Catherine's, someone we own. And I need every record of tonight's admission buried so deep it never surfaces. Can you do that?" "For the right price, we can do anything." At St. Catherine's emergency room, Clarisse was rushed through doors that hissed open like the entrance to another world. Nurses swarmed, machines beeped, and baby Naomi was whisked away to the NICU for evaluation. "Ma'am, can you tell us what happened?" a young doctor asked, examining her wounds. Clarissa's lips trembled. The truth wanted to pour out. "My husband tried to kill me. His mistress pushed me from a moving car, but something stopped her. Some instinct for survival that screamed, 'If you tell them now, they'll finish the job.'" "Car accident," she whispered. I can't remember much else." The doctor exchanged glances with a nurse. They didn't believe her. The injuries told a different story. But before they could press further, a man in an expensive suit appeared, flashing credentials. "I'm Dr. Marcus," he caught himself. "Dr. Sheffield, hospital administrator. I'll be overseeing this case personally." The young doctor frowned. "Sir, I've never seen you before. New transfer. Now, let's get this patient stabilized. And someone get me her admission paperwork. I need to review her insurance information." What Clarisse didn't know, what she couldn't know in her state of shock and blood loss, was that Dr. Sheffield was on Adrian's payroll, and he'd just been ordered to make sure that if Clarisse Corleone survived the night, she'd wake up with no legal identity, no medical records, and no proof her baby had ever been born. But there was one thing Adrian hadn't counted on. Thomas Hagen, the trucker who'd delivered Naomi, had also taken photos. Not for blackmail, not for money, but because his daughter was a civil rights attorney, and something about the terror in Clarissa's eyes when she whispered, "My husband," had triggered every protective instinct he possessed. He sat in the waiting room now, those photos already uploaded to his cloud storage, wondering if he'd just witnessed an attempted murder. His phone rang. His daughter's name flashed on the screen. "Dad, got your message. What's going on?" "Rachel," Thomas said quietly, "I think I just saved a woman from being killed by her husband. And I think he's someone powerful. I need your help. Drop a comment if this story has you hooked, and make sure you're subscribed because the next part is where everything explodes." Rachel Hagen arrived at St. Catherine's Medical Center like a force of nature. Briefcase in one hand, recording device in the other, and 15 years of civil rights litigation backing every step she took. Her father had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming that something was catastrophically wrong. "I'm here to see Clarisse Corleone," she announced at the nurse's station, flashing her bar card. "I'm her attorney." The nurse's face went pale. There's no patient here by that name." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "My father brought her here 90 minutes ago. Pregnant woman, multiple trauma injuries, just gave birth on Highway 101. Where is she?" "I'm telling you, we have no record. Then check your Jane Does." The nurse's fingers trembled as they flew across the keyboard. We have a Jane Doe in ICU, but you can't see her without family consent, and—" Rachel was already moving, her heels clicking down the corridor with military precision. She'd seen this playbook before. Erase the victim, control the narrative, make the crime disappear. But she'd never seen it deployed this fast, this efficiently. Someone powerful was scared. In the ICU, Clarisse drifted in and out of consciousness, her body pumped full of painkillers and saline. But even through the fog, she felt the absence like a physical wound. Her baby. Where was her baby? "Naomi," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Shh, don't try to talk." The nurse adjusting her IV wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, Dr. Sheffield stood in the doorway, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, sir. The patient is stabilized. No, she hasn't said anything coherent. And the birth records? Already scrubbed from the system. As far as anyone knows, there was no baby." Clarissa's eyes snapped open, clarity cutting through the drugs like a blade. No baby. They were erasing Naomi, erasing the evidence, which meant Adrian knew she was alive. Terror gave her strength. She ripped the IV from her arm, ignoring the nurse's shocked scream, and lunged for the door. Her legs barely held her, but maternal fury kept her upright. "Naomi!" she screamed into the hallway. "Where is my daughter?" That's when Rachel Hagan rounded the corner and saw her. A black woman in a hospital gown, bleeding from her arm, wild-eyed and desperate, while two security guards rushed toward her. Rachel moved on pure instinct. She stepped between Clarisse and the guards, her voice ringing with authority. "Touch her, and I will bury you in lawsuits so deep, your grandchildren will still be paying." The guards hesitated. Dr. Sheffield appeared, his face flushed with anger. "Ms. Hagan, this patient is delirious and a danger to herself. This patient is Clarisse Corleone, and you just tried to erase her existence. Start talking, or I start subpoenaing." Clarissa's legs gave out. Rachel caught her, and in that moment, their eyes met. Clarisse saw something she hadn't seen in months, someone who believed her. "My husband tried to kill me," Clarisse whispered, "and now they're taking my baby." In the NICU, baby Naomi lay in an incubator, tiny and perfect, her dark curls already thick against her head. The nameplate on her bassinet read "Baby Doe," but pinned to her blanket was something that would change everything. A hospital bracelet with a number. And in the hospital system, buried but not deleted, was a birth certificate that had been filed automatically by the emergency room software before Dr. Sheffield could stop it. That birth certificate had 3 critical pieces of information. Mother, Clarisse Stratton, Corleone. Father, Adrian Michael Corleone. Blood type, AB negative. AB negative, one of the rarest blood types in the world. And according to Adrian Corleone's medical records, the ones required for his company's life insurance policy, he had type O positive. It was genetically impossible for him to father an AB negative child, which meant one of 2 things. Either Adrian wasn't the father, or someone had been lying about Adrian's blood type for a very long time. Rachel worked fast. Within an hour, she had the birth certificate, photographs from her father's phone, and a restraining order preventing anyone from moving or discharging Clarisse without court approval. She also made one more call to a journalist friend at the San Francisco Chronicle who specialized in exposing the crimes of the wealthy. "I'm sending you something. Biggest story of your career. Billionaire Adrian Corleone attempted to murder his pregnant wife. There are witnesses. There's evidence, and I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg." But Rachel had no idea how right she was. Across the city, in Adrian's penthouse office, James Wolfe sat across from his former employer with a manila envelope between them. Inside were the photographs, Clarissa's broken body on the highway, the birth, Thomas Hagan's truck, everything. "You were supposed to clean this up," Adrian hissed. "I did. I documented it. And now we're going to talk about my retirement package." "You're blackmailing me?" James smiled. "I'm negotiating. See, here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer $20 million to an offshore account. In exchange, these photos disappear, and I forget I ever saw your wife crawl out of her grave." Adrian's hand moved to his desk drawer where he kept a gun. But James was faster, pulling out his own weapon and placing it casually on the table. "Don't," James said calmly, "because here's what you don't know. I'm not the only one with copies. If anything happens to me, these photos get sent automatically to the FBI, the SEC, and every major news outlet in the country. Your IPO? Dead. Your company? Destroyed. Your freedom? Gone." Adrian's face went purple with rage, but he was trapped, and he knew it. "Fine," he spat. 20 million, but this ends here." James stood, pocketing his weapon. "Oh, Adrian, this is just beginning." As he walked out, James pulled out his phone and made one final call to the one person who'd been waiting for this moment for 3 years. "Mrs. Corleone Sr., it's James Wolfe. I have information about your son that you need to hear." Adrian's mother, Margaret Corleone, had never approved of Clarisse. But she'd also never approved of Vivian. What she cared about was legacy, bloodlines, and the family empire her late husband had built. And she'd just learned that her granddaughter had been born, and that her son had tried to erase them both. Margaret hung up the phone and stared out at the San Francisco skyline, her mind working through scenarios with the cold precision of a chess master. Adrian thought he was untouchable. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing. Margaret controlled the family trust, the real money, the foundation beneath his entire empire, and she'd just decided it was time to remind her son who really held the power. She made 3 calls, first to her lawyer, second to a private investigator, third to the hospital where her granddaughter lay sleeping in the NICU. "This is Margaret Corleone. I'm coming for my granddaughter, and anyone who stands in my way will regret it." Back in the ICU, Clarisse lay in Rachel's arms, finally allowing herself to break. The tears came like a dam bursting, 3 years of pain and betrayal pouring out. "He laughed," she sobbed. "When she pushed me, he laughed." Rachel held her tighter. "Then we're going to make sure the whole world hears about it. And Clarisse, your daughter is safe. I promise you that." But neither of them knew that the battle for Naomi was about to become a war, one that would expose secrets that went far deeper than Adrian's attempted murder. Because in a safe deposit box downtown, there was a document that Adrian's father had left behind before his death. A document that changed everything about the Corleone empire and who truly had the right to inherit it. And baby Naomi's blood type was about to unlock that secret. If you're racing through this story like I am, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your predictions. What do you think Adrian's hiding? 72 hours after the highway incident, Adrian Corleone stood before his bathroom mirror, watching his empire crumble in real time on his phone screen. The headline blazed across every news outlet. Tech billionaire's wife survives murder attempt. Baby born on highway. His IPO had been suspended. His board was in emergency session. And worst of all, his mother had seized control of the family trust, freezing every account he owned. "You tried to kill your wife and erase my granddaughter," Margaret had told him coldly over the phone. "Your father would be ashamed. I know I am." But Adrian's biggest problem wasn't his mother. It was the DNA test. In St. Catherine's Hospital, Clarisse held Naomi close, but her heart was breaking for a different reason. Hospital security, not hired by Adrian this time, but by Margaret Corleone, had informed her that morning. Margaret was petitioning for emergency custody of the baby. "Your son tried to murder me, and now you want to take my daughter?" Clarisse had screamed when Margaret arrived, flanked by lawyers. Margaret's face was stone. "My son is a monster, but this child carries Corleone blood, and I will not allow her to be raised in poverty while you recover. You're homeless, injured and hunted. I can protect her. Can you? The words hit like bullets because they were true. Clarisse had nothing, no home, no money, no ID. Adrian had erased her bank accounts, canceled her credit cards, and spread rumors that she'd been institutionalized for mental illness. Rachel fought hard, but the judge's ruling was devastating. Temporary custody to Margaret Corleone, pending a full investigation. Clarisse would have supervised visitation only. When they took Naomi from her arms, Clarisse's anguished scream echoed through the hospital corridors. She'd survived being pushed from a speeding car. She'd given birth on a highway. But this, losing her daughter, this might actually kill her. Meanwhile, Vivian Chen sat in Adrian's penthouse, watching her own world implode. Her father had withdrawn his support from Adrian's company. Their engagement was postponed indefinitely. And worse, the photos James Wolfe had taken showed her face clearly as she pushed Clarisse from the car. "They're going to arrest me," she whispered, scrolling through her phone. "Attempted murder. Conspiracy. I could go to prison for life." Adrian barely looked at her. "Then run. I can't protect you anymore. You said it would work. You said she'd die and no one would know. Well, she didn't die, and now everyone knows," Adrian roared, hurling his phone across the room. "Get out! Get out before I'm tempted to finish what we started." Vivian fled, and Adrian was alone with his rage and his ruin. But in the darkness, a plan formed. If he couldn't have his empire, if he couldn't have his freedom, then he'd make sure Clarisse lost everything too. He made one call to a contact in family services, someone who owed him favors. "I want that baby declared a ward of the state. I want the mother deemed unfit, and I want it done before my mother can finalize adoption." "Sir, that's not how—" "Make it happen, whatever it costs." At Margaret's estate, Naomi slept peacefully in a nursery that cost more than most houses, but Margaret stood at the window, a letter in her trembling hands, the letter her late husband had left in his safe, to be opened only when the truth matters most. She'd opened it an hour ago. And what she'd read had changed everything. Her husband's final confession. Adrian wasn't his biological son. He'd adopted him decades ago from a desperate woman who'd needed money, which meant Adrian had no Corleone blood at all. But Naomi? The baby sleeping in the next room? The DNA test Margaret had secretly ordered showed she carried markers that matched Margaret's late husband's family line perfectly, which was impossible, unless Clarisse had Corleone blood. Margaret's hands shook as she dialed her investigator. Find out everything about Clarisse Stratton's biological father. Everything. And do it fast. What she was about to discover would destroy her family's legacy and save Clarisse's mare. The private investigator's report landed on Margaret Corleone's desk at 3 a.m., and what she read made her blood run cold, then boiling hot with rage at what her adopted son had done. Clarisse Stratton's biological father, Michael Corleone Jr., Margaret's late husband's younger brother, the uncle who'd disappeared 30 years ago after a falling out over the family business, who'd changed his name to Michael Stratton and vanished into Memphis, Tennessee, who'd died of a heart attack when Clarisse was 5, leaving behind a daughter who never knew she was born into one of America's wealthiest families, which meant Clarisse wasn't just Adrian's wife. She was a Corleone by blood, the true heir to the family fortune. And Adrian, the adopted son with no biological claim, had tried to murder the one person whose bloodline was more legitimate than his own. Margaret's lawyer appeared in her doorway, his face grave. Ma'am, there's more. I found the original will. Your husband's real will, not the one Adrian presented after his death. It was hidden in a second safe deposit box. He slid the document across her desk, and Margaret's hands trembled as she read her late husband's final wishes. If any biological Corleone heir emerges, all family assets transfer to them immediately. Adrian has served the company well, but blood is blood. My brother Michael's line must be protected above all. He knew, Margaret whispered. He knew Michael had a daughter somewhere. And there's a DNA registry clause. Any child born with Corleone genetic markers automatically triggers an inheritance investigation. That's why the hospital's automatic DNA screening flagged baby Naomi. Her blood work shows she's a direct descendant of the Corleone line through both parents. Margaret's mind reeled. Both parents? But Adrian isn't. Then it hit her like lightning. Clarissa's mother, she breathed. Who was Clarissa's mother? The investigator pulled out another file. Diana Stratton, née Diana Volkov. But here's where it gets interesting. Diana worked as a private nurse for your family 32 years ago, when your husband's brother Michael was still living in the estate. The implications crashed over Margaret like a tidal wave. Michael and Diana. A forbidden relationship. A pregnancy. Diana leaving in disgrace. Michael following her to Memphis, both of them keeping the secret to protect the child. Clarisse wasn't just a Corleone. She was potentially the primary Corleone heir, with bloodline claims on both sides of her parentage through distant family connections that the investigator was still untangling. And Naomi? She was a Corleone squared, carrying the genetic legacy that Adrian had spent 3 years trying to erase. Margaret stood. Her decision crystallized. Get Clarisse here. Now, we have a legacy to restore. At a women's shelter in Oakland, Clarisse sat in a bare room with Rachel staring at the wall. She'd lost everything. Her husband, her home, her baby, her will to keep fighting. I should have died on that highway, she whispered. At least then I'd be with my daughter. Don't you dare, Rachel said fiercely. We're going to get Naomi back, I promise you. Rachel's phone buzzed. A call from Margaret Corleone's lawyer. 5 minutes later, Clarisse was in Rachel's car, speeding toward the Corleone estate, barely daring to hope. When Margaret opened the door, Clarisse saw something she'd never expected. Tears in the older woman's eyes. Come in, child. We have much to discuss. Margaret led her to the study where Naomi slept peacefully in a bassinet. Clarissa's legs nearly gave out, but Margaret caught her arm. She's yours. She was always yours. And I'm going to make sure the whole world knows it. Then Margaret told her everything. The bloodline, the will, the inheritance, the truth about who Clarisse really was. You're not just my granddaughter's mother, Margaret said, her voice breaking. You're family. You always were. And Adrian, that monster, he must have discovered your lineage somehow. That's why he wanted you dead. You weren't an embarrassment. You were a threat to everything he'd stolen. Clarissa's mind spun. I don't want his money. I just want my daughter. You'll have both, Margaret said firmly. Because according to your grandfather's will, my husband's will, you and Naomi are the rightful heirs to the Corleone fortune, all $12 billion of it. Across the city, Adrian's phone rang. His lawyer's voice was panicked. Sir, we have a problem. A massive problem. Margaret just filed documentation with the probate court. Your father's real will has surfaced, and what? And Clarisse Corleone is named as primary beneficiary. She's a biological Corleone. Your adoption papers show you have no blood claim. Sir, you're about to lose everything." Adrian's vision went red. He'd murdered for this empire. He'd destroyed his soul for it. And now some woman he'd tried to erase was going to take it all? "No," he growled. "I'll burn it down before I let that happen." He grabbed his car keys, a gun from his safe, and headed for the door. If he couldn't have the Corleone empire, then neither could Clarisse. But James Wolfe was waiting in the hallway, federal agents flanking him. "Adrian Corleone, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and about 16 other charges." "You have the right to remain silent." Adrian's knees buckled. His carefully constructed world, the lies, the violence, and the stolen legacy, all of it came crashing down in handcuffs and Miranda rights. At the Corleone estate, Clarisse held Naomi close, tears streaming down her face as Margaret placed a hand on her shoulder. "Welcome home, granddaughter," Margaret whispered. "Welcome home." Drop a comment if you saw this twist coming, and stay subscribed, because the finale is going to blow your mind. The San Francisco courthouse had never seen a media circus like this. Outside, hundreds of reporters crushed against barricades, cameras flashing like lightning storms. Inside courtroom 6B, the trial of the decade was reaching its explosive climax. The people versus Adrian Corleone and Vivian Chen. Clarisse sat in the front row, Naomi sleeping peacefully in her arms, Margaret Corleone beside her like a fortress. 6 months had passed since that nightmare on the highway. 6 months of healing, fighting, and reclaiming everything that had been stolen from her. Adrian sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his billion-dollar empire reduced to ashes. Vivian sat separately, her own legal team having secured a plea deal in exchange for testimony against him. She wouldn't meet Clarisse's eyes. The prosecutor stood, her voice ringing through the courtroom. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. We have photographs of the defendant's vehicle with Ms. Corleone being dragged alongside it. We have testimony from Thomas Hagen, the trucker who witnessed the birth. We have Ms. Chen's confession detailing the premeditated nature of this crime. And we have phone records showing Mr. Corleone ordering hospital staff to erase evidence of his daughter's existence." But the defense had one final card to play. Adrian's lawyer stood, desperation evident in his voice. "Your Honor, my client maintains that this was a tragic misunderstanding. Ms. Corleone's injuries were the result of an accident. She attempted to exit a moving vehicle during a mental health crisis. My client's attempts to manage hospital records were simply to protect his wife's privacy during a difficult time." The courtroom erupted in angry murmurs. The judge slammed her gavel. "Counselor, are you seriously suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that Ms. Corleone's recent discovery of her inheritance has motivated her to fabricate these accusations. She stands to gain $12 billion from this testimony." Clarisse felt Rachel tense beside her, ready to object, but Clarisse rose on her own, Naomi still in her arms. "Your Honor, may I address this?" The judge hesitated, then nodded. "Ms. Corleone, you may approach." Clarisse walked to the witness stand, every eye in the courtroom fixed on her. She'd testified before, but this was different. This was her moment to make Adrian face what he'd done. She looked directly at her husband, former husband, as of 3 weeks ago, and her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "6 months ago, I was pushed from a speeding car and left to die on a highway. I gave birth to my daughter on the side of the road, bleeding and terrified. Do you know what I thought about in that moment, Adrian? I thought about how I loved you." how I'd stood by you through everything, how I'd believed in the man you pretended to be. Adrian's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. You didn't just try to kill me because of money. You tried to kill me because I was black, because I didn't fit your image, because loving me became inconvenient when your investors decided I was bad for business. You erased me like I never existed. You laughed while your mistress pushed me from that car. Tears flowed freely now, but her voice never wavered. I didn't know I was a Corleone by blood when you did this. I didn't know about any inheritance. I just knew I was your wife, carrying your child, and you decided we were disposable. So don't you dare stand there and claim I fabricated this for money. I would give every penny back if it meant Naomi could grow up with a father who loved her. But you took that choice away from both of us. The courtroom was silent except for the soft sounds of people weeping. The prosecutor approached with a tablet. Ms. Corleone, is this the man you married? On the screen was a photo from their wedding. Adrian's eyes soft, his smile genuine, his hand gentle on her cheek. Yes, Clarisse whispered. And is this the same man who orchestrated your attempted murder? Another photo appeared. Adrian in his Mercedes that night, captured by traffic cameras, his face twisted with cold rage as Vivian reached for Clarisse in the back seat. Yes, Clarisse said, her voice stronger now. But he stopped being the man I married long before that night. I just refused to see it. The prosecution's final witness was the one that shattered Adrian's defense completely, James Wolfe. The former fixer walked to the stand with the confidence of a man who'd secured full immunity in exchange for his testimony. He'd brought everything: emails, recorded phone calls, bank transfers showing Adrian's payments to corrupt hospital staff. But the most damning evidence was the video. I recorded this conversation 3 days before the incident, James explained as the video played on courtroom monitors. Adrian's voice filled the room. She's a problem that needs to disappear. Make it look like an accident. I don't care how, just make sure there's no body, no baby, and no evidence. The courtroom exploded. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Adrian's lawyer dropped his pen. Adrian himself sat frozen, his face ashen. There was no spinning this, no explaining it away. You son of a bitch, Adrian hissed at James. You work for me, James smiled coldly. I worked for your father. Real recognizes real, and you were never real Corleone blood. Clarisse is, so yeah, I chose the winning side. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. When they returned, the forewoman stood with tears in her eyes. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Adrian Corleone, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. The litany continued: fraud, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Adrian's head dropped to the table. Vivian, watching from her own sentencing hearing next door via video link, sobbed uncontrollably. The judge's voice was granite. Mr. Corleone, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. You attempted to murder your wife and unborn child for money and image. You corrupted institutions meant to protect the vulnerable. You betrayed every oath you ever took. She paused, her eyes moving to where Clarisse sat with Naomi. But perhaps your greatest crime was this. You had everything: love, family, a future. and you threw it away for an empire built on lies. You will have decades in prison to contemplate that choice." The gavel fell like a guillotine. Outside the courthouse, Clarisse stood before a wall of microphones, Margaret and Rachel flanking her, Naomi peaceful in her arms. "I don't have a prepared statement," Clarisse said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "I just want to say this. I survived because I refused to let my daughter grow up without a mother. I fought because every woman who's ever been discarded, erased, or told she doesn't matter deserves to know that we do matter. Our lives matter. Our babies matter." A reporter shouted, "What will you do with the Corleone fortune?" Clarisse smiled, her first real smile in months. "I'm starting a foundation for women escaping domestic violence, for single mothers who need support, for anyone who's been told they're disposable. The Naomi Corleone Foundation, because my daughter's name means pleasant and beautiful, and I'm going to make sure this world is a more pleasant and beautiful place for every child born into it." The crowd erupted in applause. Margaret squeezed her shoulder. "Your grandfather would be so proud." Clarisse looked down at Naomi, who yawned and opened her eyes, dark eyes that held the future in them. "We won, baby girl," Clarisse whispered. "We survived, and we won." One more part to go. Don't miss the conclusion. Comment below if this story moved you, and make sure you're subscribed for the powerful ending coming next. 1 year later, the morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Corleone estate as Clarisse stood in what used to be Adrian's office, now her command center for the Naomi Corleone Foundation. The walls that once held photos of Adrian's corporate conquests now displayed images of women and children whose lives had been transformed by the Foundation's work. 15 shelters across the country, legal aid for 5,000 women, educational scholarships, emergency housing, medical care. All of it funded by the empire Adrian had killed for and lost. "Mama!" Naomi toddled through the door, her dark curls bouncing, her laugh filling the room like music. At 16 months old, she was walking, talking, and showing signs of the fierce spirit that had brought her into the world on a highway median. Clarisse scooped her daughter up, breathing in that sweet baby scent that never got old. "Good morning, my beautiful girl. Did Grandma Margaret spoil you at breakfast again?" "Pancakes," Naomi announced proudly, chocolate smudged on her cheek. Margaret appeared in the doorway, laughing. "She has your appetite, and your grandfather's charm. Heaven help us all." The relationship between Clarisse and Margaret had transformed from adversarial to unshakable. Margaret had become the mother Clarisse lost, and Clarisse had given Margaret something precious. A chance to right the wrongs of the past, to build a legacy based on love instead of control. "The architect called," Margaret said, settling into a chair. "The new women's shelter downtown is ahead of schedule. They want to know if you'll do the ribbon cutting next month." "Absolutely." Clarisse pulled up her calendar on her tablet. Her life was full now, purposefully, beautifully full. Board meetings, foundation events, Mommy and Me classes with Naomi, therapy sessions where she continued healing from trauma that would never fully disappear but no longer defined her. Rachel Hagen burst through the door, grinning like she'd won the lottery. "Turn on the news, Channel 7, now." Clarisse grabbed the remote, and there it was. Footage of Adrian being transferred to a maximum security federal prison after his appeals were denied. He looked gaunt, broken, nothing like the powerful man who'd once commanded boardrooms and believed himself untouchable. The reporter's voice narrated, "Adrian Corleone, once valued at $12 billion, now serves his sentence in a 6-by-8 cell. Meanwhile, his ex-wife Clarice Corleone has transformed his former empire into one of the nation's leading philanthropic organizations. The Naomi Corleone Foundation has helped over 10,000 women escape domestic violence in its first year alone. Clarice clicked the TV off. She felt nothing looking at Adrian now. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual love. Just a distant sadness for the man he could have been if he'd chosen differently. "Mama sad?" Naomi asked, her little hand touching Clarice's cheek with that intuitive wisdom children possess. "No, baby. Mama's grateful. So grateful." That afternoon, Clarice drove to St. Catherine's Medical Center, not as a patient this time, but as a donor. The hospital had built a new trauma wing with foundation funding, specifically designed to protect vulnerable patients from the kind of corruption that had almost erased her and Naomi. Thomas Hagen waited in the lobby, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw her. The trucker who'd delivered Naomi had become like an uncle, his quick thinking and compassionate heart forever woven into their family story. "There's my girl." Thomas lifted Naomi high, earning delighted squeals. "Growing like a weed, aren't you?" "She takes after her mother," Clarice said warmly. "Stubborn, strong, and impossible to kill." They toured the new wing together. State-of-the-art equipment, private rooms with security systems, a dedicated legal advocacy office where Rachel now volunteered twice a week. In the birthing center, Clarice paused at a plaque on the wall. "The Naomi Wing, where every mother matters, every baby is protected, and no woman will ever be erased. In memory of a highway birth that changed everything." Tears pricked Clarice's eyes. This was victory. Not destroying Adrian, though justice had been served. Not the money, though it enabled so much good. Victory was knowing that no other woman would suffer what she'd suffered, not if she could prevent it. That evening, the foundation hosted its first annual gala. The ballroom glittered with San Francisco's elite. But this time, they came to honor survivors, not billionaires. Clarice stood at the podium in a stunning emerald gown, Naomi in Margaret's arms in the front row, and looked out at a sea of faces. Some she knew, many she didn't. All of them united by a belief that women's lives mattered. "A year ago," Clarice began, her voice steady and clear, "I gave birth on the side of Highway 101 after being pushed from a speeding car. I should have died that night. My daughter should have died. But we didn't. And I want you to know why." The room fell silent. "We survived because a trucker named Thomas Hagen saw us and didn't look away. Because a lawyer named Rachel Hagen fought for us when we had nothing. Because a woman named Margaret Corleone chose truth over protecting her son's lies. We survived because people chose to see us as human beings worthy of saving." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Every woman we help through this foundation is someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's sister. They deserve the same chance I got, the chance to rebuild, to heal, to discover their own strength. So tonight, we're not just raising money. We're raising a standard. We're saying that no amount of wealth, no amount of power gives anyone the right to erase another human being." The applause was thunderous. Later, after the speeches and the champagne and the dancing, Clarice sat in the nursery at home, rocking Naomi to sleep. Through the window, San Francisco sparkled like scattered diamonds. "Your daddy made some terrible choices," Clarice whispered to her sleeping daughter. "But you know what? Those choices don't define you. You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, knowing you're worthy, knowing that your mama fought heaven and hell to keep you safe." She kissed Naomi's forehead. "And someday, when you're old enough, I'll tell you the whole story. Not to make you hate him, but to help you understand that people are complicated. That evil often wears a charming smile. That love, real love, is about choice, not circumstance." Naomi stirred, her tiny hand gripping Clarissa's finger, even in sleep. "You're a Corleone," Clarisse continued softly. "But more than that, you're a survivor, just like your mama. And we're going to change the world together, baby girl. One saved life at a time." 3 years later. Epilogue. Naomi Corleone's 4th birthday party was held at the Foundation's flagship shelter. Not at the estate, because Clarisse wanted her daughter to grow up understanding where blessings came from and who they were meant to serve. Surrounded by children of survivors, by women who'd rebuilt their lives, by the community that had embraced them both, Naomi blew out her candles with fierce determination. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" Margaret asked. Naomi smiled, chocolate frosting on her nose. "That everybody gets a happy birthday like mine, Grandma." Clarissa's heart swelled. This beautiful, compassionate child was her greatest victory. Not the foundation, not the justice. This little girl who believed everyone deserved happiness, who was growing up with love as her foundation instead of fear. Thomas caught Clarissa's eye from across the room and raised his coffee cup in salute. Rachel laughed at something one of the kids said. Margaret wiped away happy tears, and Clarisse thought, "We did it. We not only survived, we thrived." Adrian Corleone had tried to erase her, to throw her away like she never mattered, but she'd taken his empire of lies and transformed it into a legacy of truth. She'd taken his cruelty and answered it with compassion. She'd taken his darkness and filled it with light. And every single day, women walked through the Foundation's doors, broken, scared, desperate, and walked out believing in themselves again. That was the real inheritance. Not money, not property, but hope. Clarisse lifted Naomi high, spinning her around as their daughter's laughter rang out like victory bells. "Higher, Mama, higher." And Clarisse thought, "We're already as high as we need to be, baby. We're already flying."